Well, hello everybody. I'm Grant Carden, the Extension Soil Specialist on campus there in Logan, and I'm standing out here at our long-term tillage plots on the Dryland Research Station out at Blue Creek. These particular plots have been in rotation now for about 10 seasons. What we have out here, and I'm just standing on the edge of one of our replications, are production size plots that we put out a number of years ago to look at different rotations with wheat and safflower combined with different tillage treatments and a couple of different rotational ideas to try to get more crops in to our traditional fallow systems out on the dryland. So let me just kind of run through what the treatments are, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the key things that we've been seeing, what is yet to be measured out here to look at some of the soil properties as they've changed with respect to the treatments. And then I want to kind of walk through maybe some of the plots and identify a few things that we've been seeing over the years out here. So that the treatments that we have out here there's 8 different treatments. We have a wheat fallow rotation, a wheat fallow safflower rotation, and both of those rotations we're looking at in a strict no-till and a conventional tillage regime. On the no-till, it's a chem fallow, obviously for weed control and so forth. On the conventional till, it's both tillage and occasional spray treatments to control the weeds on those. Then we have a 2-crop in three-year rotation, where we go with a safflower fallow wheat back into safflower rotation, so that we only have one fallow season in between the cropping seasons, to try to squeeze more crop production out of the system. So in the background, you can see that in the plots that are in rotation right now for those 2-crop in 3-year rotations, we have safflower currently planted, and I'll walk you through some of those plots. What we're looking at there right now is that that'll come out of safflower. It'll go into a full year of fallow, coming back in not this fall, but next fall into wheat, come out of the wheat and go right back in the following spring to safflower. So we squeeze in a full fallow in there and try to get 2 crops in on top of each other on those. The other treatments that we have that make up the rest of the 8, we noticed out here early on in the process that going with a strict no-till chem fallow type of approach didn't afford us as many options for, and I apologize for the wind noise here, we get a few gusts today, didn't afford us as much flexibility in weed control as we might want, particularly with jointed goat grass and getting some of the thistle and prickly lettuce and other things that we deal with out here germinated up enough early in the spring to really have as effective a control as we'd like. So we introduced a new set of treatments in the wheat fallow rotation, where we do a real light tillage with a harrow in the springtime in those. So it's not a full-blown no-till treatment. Again, I apologize for the wind. Maybe I'll let it settle down just a little bit here. But we get a light harrow in the spring to try to get some of the weed seed incorporated and stirred up, so that we get some germination of that early on, so that we get better chemical control in what would be then what we call a conservation tillage, not a strict no-till arrangement. So that's the treatments that you'll see out here. If you get an opportunity to come out to the Blue Creek Research Station, come up all the way to the hill road to the east, you'll see our plots out here. designed those plots to be basically production-sized areas. They're 50 feet by 150 feet, so 50 feet wide by 150 feet long, which allows us to use traditional seeding and harvesting equipment on those plots rather than just have small plots that we're hand sampling all the time. Try to be more realistic with our yield measurements and with our seeding and cultivation and weed control treatments as we would be with field-sized equipment. So if you have an opportunity, come on out, come all the way up the east end of the hill road above the buildings in Blue Creek, and you're free to walk through the plots and take a look at them. Some of the key things that we've seen in our treatments. Essentially, our yields have been no different between our no-till and our traditional conventional till plots. We have had marginally better weed control in those plots that we don't do a straight no-till, but do the spring harrow treatment to try to get the weeds terminated and so forth in those. Although most of our weed control has been pretty good for the most part, unless we get some early summer rains that get some of the weeds up and going after we've done some of the early treatments, where we've had to follow back in with additional sprays or tillage. Most of the time, our control has been really rather excellent with weeds. You can see the weed control here in the strict no-till treatment right to my left. The spray that we've generally used is typically just Roundup on these. Early in the spring, we might mix in something like a broadleaf 2,4-D or dicamba, but we try not to do that late in the season for carryover reasons and exposure, then drift and whatnot if we're using the 2,4-D. So we've really only primarily focused on using Roundup out here, glyphosate, not the newer Roundup mixtures, but the glyphosate. And at application recommended application rates on those, and we've accomplished our weed control with 1 or 2 sprays typically on these plots. This year has been an interesting one where we've got some early summer, midsummer rains that have germinated quite a few weeds. We might go back in and do a second spray on our plots here in the next couple of weeks with the Roundup, and certainly on the conventional till come back through with additional tillage. Some of the other things we've seen, besides basically uniform yields across all the treatments, and typically only 1 or 2 sprays on either the no-till or the conventional till, is that we're able to really have apples to apples comparisons on what's now taking place in the soil. Are we in fact seeing benefits from the residue management in no-till with respect to carbon accumulation and with respect to soil aggregate stability and those kinds of things? So that's really our next phase of this research. We've come out in this last spring and took extensive sampling across the entire area to start looking at some of those soil properties now that we're well in to the long-term establishment of conditions in these plots. So we hope to have some data this fall that will look at the aggregate stability and carbon content to see if we can really see some soil health benefits with respect to the residue management regimes out here, both the strict no-till and the spring harrow treatments out here versus the conventional till. Okay, so now let's go back here. I'll take you on a quick walk through the plots. So I thought we'd take a little walk through the plots here. so that you can see what we've got going on here with the different treatments. Crop in 4-year rotation. So here again we're looking at the plots where we aren't strictly no-till. You can still see quite a bit of wheat stubble on the ground maintained there, but we come through in the spring with a light tillage with a spring tooth harrow. Weeds germinated up ahead of chemical treatment. The interesting thing you see here, quite a bit of thistle in these particular plots. Over the last little while we've had some midsummer rains that have caused those to pop up. We still have really good control of the prickly lettuce and things like that from the past, but the thistles pop back up. So we probably need to spray this a second time here in order to get the best control possible. We'll walk down here to the next plot. The next plot is our conventional fallow. So our conventional till plots here. So right now they're in fallow. And so you can see the weed control, obviously a good here with just the conventional tillage. This has really only been tilled twice so far. You can still see quite a bit of wheat stubble from the last summer's wheat crop in there. Next to that plot is our strict no-till plots. And I don't know if these are the ones that go back into safflower or wheat, but I think everything goes back into wheat actually in rotation this next year. But we have really good weed control. Prickly lettuce was pretty well handled. This has really only been sprayed one time this last spring, but you see quite a bit of stubble left on the ground here to help maintain the soil in place, and it's doing a great job. Thistle was pretty well controlled in these plots compared to the spring harrowed plots. And then we have a good comparison location here, because we have our safflower both in no-till, which is the plot right here in front of us, right next to, as it turns out, in the way this one got randomized, right next to the conventional tillage plots for the safflower. So the division in them is right there, and so you can see the side-by-side. I'll back up a little bit. Side-by-side comparison here with the no-till side compared to the conventional tilled side, and the safflower is doing just as well here. One of the interesting things, and hopefully I'll throw a picture, a still photo up on it, that happened this last year. We noticed that the no-till plots were considerably behind in terms of the safflower early on because of the wheat stubble left on the surface from the combine in the areas where the combine laid the straw down. We had some delay in the germination and early growth of the safflower, but it's caught up and it's doing just as well as our conventional till plots. And that's been the case out here, as we've had comparable yields in both no-till and conventional till treatments out here, and both with the wheat and the safflower. And the safflower in the 2-year and 3-year, or 2-crop in 3-year rotations have been competitive with those following just a full-blown wheat fallow, safflower fallow type rotation. So